Hello and welcome along to this webinar on better project planning and estimating. My name is Sean Whitaker and I will be taking you through this topic for the next 20 or 30 minutes. Let's start with an outline of exactly what it is that we are going to cover and perhaps touch on some of the things we aren't going to cover. Given the time that we've got available and obviously the nature of this webinar, it's not prudent to go into things in depth, so what we're going to do is to give you an overview of planning and estimating, some of the reasons for poor performance in planning and estimating, and some suggestions on how to improve your plans and your estimates. Once again, just to reiterate, this is a broad introduction. Obviously, there are many other ways to get tuition or an education on specific forms of planning and estimating, and if at the end of the presentation you do have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I'm more than happy to chat with you about your specific questions with planning and estimating. But let's move on. Here's a cartoon from Scott Adams, one of my favorite cartoonists, and this is of course the Dilbert cartoon, which I absolutely adore. He seems to be able to capture at times the very essence of some of the challenges we face as project managers. And I'm sure as you read this cartoon, you'll probably be very familiar with this situation. Certainly I've been in many instances where I've been asked to give an estimate and there's been political pressure to say the right thing, or somebody wants a firm estimate with very loose plans and can't understand why that can't happen as well. So I'm sure you can relate to the situation there in the Dilbert cartoon. Just before we do move further, let's take a look at some of the basic definitions to make sure we understand what we're talking about. First up, and it's rather simple and straightforward, a definition of the term planning is just making a plan for something. And obviously that's part of the heart of project management, or good project management, is making appropriate plans for what you think may or may not occur in the future, and putting in place contingencies for if things do or do not occur. We make plans. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're in construction and your plans are years long, or whether you're in a highly complex IT environment and your plans are simply for the next 24 hours or the next week or the next 2 weeks or the next sprint, whatever it is. We all make plans. Estimating, and the definition here, is to roughly calculate or judge the value, number, quantity, or extent of. Notice those first two words, roughly calculate. So estimating, or as I like to say, guesstimating, well, it is exactly that. Because all planning and estimating is simply an attempt to forecast a possible future state based on the information available at hand today. Obviously, the more information we have today and the better that information, the better your plans and estimates will be. Now, this is often something that stakeholders don't understand, and why we get pressured to give detailed plans and estimates based on incomplete information. When it comes to planning and estimating, these are the areas within the profession of project management that we may find ourselves doing plans and estimates. We will do plans and estimates for costs and revenues, so we know the timing of our finances, any profit margin or surpluses, and all of those things. We need to be able to have those in place. We'll also do plans and estimates for time or schedule, how long we're going to take and when we plan to finish. We'll also have plans and estimates for quality and risks. We'll put in place plans to manage stakeholder expectations and gain their support, and put in place some estimates on how many stakeholders we have and what their views of our project are. We'll also have plans and estimates that outline the expected benefits we expect to realize, and also strategic goals. As we begin a project, we'll have plans and estimates for the requirements that we're supposed to deliver. Whether it's IT or construction, there's always requirements from customers and other stakeholders. And those are some other areas there too where we may have plans and estimates that we need to do. Now, before we do go any further, it's important to realize that planning and estimating occurs throughout the complete life cycle of projects at the strategic level, the organizational level. There is strategic planning and estimating. The strategies that are put in place and the estimates of how long it will take to achieve those strategies. Also at an organizational level or a business unit level, there are estimates put in place for expenditure and revenue for that business unit or the organization. When you come to start a project and consider a potential idea, you use a business case to look at different plans and estimates to decide whether or not to go ahead with the project. And then during project performance or execution, you'll be doing planning and estimating throughout the whole life of the project, replanning, re-estimating, making sure that you've got good visibility of where things may be going or are going. And then finally, when you've delivered the product, service or result of that project, you'll use your plans and estimates with benefits realization to compare what you originally thought either at the strategic point of view or at the business case level to what actually occurred with the project. And remember, if you do this part of it, you can improve, you can learn things to improve your future planning and estimating. And we'll touch on that again towards the end of this presentation. It may seem obvious, but it's worthwhile looking at why planning and estimating is actually important to a successful project. And after all, isn't that what we all want? Successful projects. Well, there are many elements or components of what makes a successful project. And planning and estimating are both critical components of a successful project. There's been plenty of research done by the Project Management Institute. The research has consistently demonstrated that a lack of or the existence of poor planning and estimating is indeed one of the primary causes of project failure. That may seem self-evident, but a lot of people don't realize that. Research has also demonstrated that when planning is done properly and appropriately, and the plans and estimates are rigorous and proven, it does in fact prove to be the most important factor in improving project results in terms of cost, time and scope. In fact, and I have highlighted this in bold here, simply doing better planning and estimating can account for as much as a 40% improvement in results on its own. So no matter how you want to interpret that 40%, whether you want to break it down into financial figures or customer satisfaction or client reputation, whatever it is, 40% based on better planning and estimating is a huge number and a huge improvement. So there's your justification for taking a bit of time to put in place better planning and estimating. Now, of course, the interesting thing is that as the profession of project management does indeed mature, there is maturity happening in all sorts of areas within the profession. We see the rise of the PMO, we see greater appreciation of strategic alignment and project management as a strategic enabler. We see an increase in certifications for project managers, whether it's professional certifications like PMP or a master's degree in project management. But again, the research has shown us that despite these increases in other areas of the profession, the areas of planning and estimating has really not shown any significant improvement for the last 15 years. Now that is doubly concerning because the previous slide that we looked at showed just how important planning and estimating was to project success. And I'm at a loss to explain why this may be. The only thing I can think of, and I would be interested in hearing your opinion on this, is perhaps we see it as one of those basic foundational elements of project management that we somehow take it for granted. And maybe as practitioners, we're all getting a little bit too excited about the higher level concepts in project management and not really focusing ourselves on these foundational parts of project management. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on why planning and estimating hasn't really improved while other aspects of the profession have. And in fact, a quote from Dr. Terry Cook Davies. The most commonly used method of estimating is informal and comparative, and like planning, this is not carried out by people possessing specialist skills. The most commonly reported practice is that estimating is carried out by untrained project managers. Neither planning or estimating is seen as core skills by most companies. Now that's an interesting observation. And again, it goes along with what I was saying on the previous slide, that perhaps we just treat planning and estimating as something that's just done somehow. Of course, there are specialist credentials and there are specialist professions in all parts of planning and estimating. And my advice would be, if you do find yourself in a complex project, reach out to these professionals and ask them to help you with your plans and your estimates. But regardless, and I do agree with Terry here on this, all project management practitioners should first of all appreciate the importance of this foundational skill of the profession and practice it and seek to be better at it. And again, it is particularly surprising that there is this lack of improvement in project management, given that in the following standards, planning processes play such an important part. We can see that with the Project Management Institute Standard for Portfolio Management, the 3rd edition, 8 of the 16 processes in that entire book belong to the defining or planning process group. And in the PMBOK Guide 5th edition, of the entire 47 processes in that book, 24 of them belong to the planning group of processes. Just over half of them. In ISO 21500 Guidance on Project Management, which was released in 2012, 16 of the 40 processes in there relate to planning. And as we also know, product-based planning lies at the heart of the PRINCE2 methodology. So we can see that planning and estimating has been captured and documented in some of the foundational texts that guide the profession of project management. And in fact, out of curiosity, I went into the PMBOK Guide 5th edition. And this is what I discovered. That if you take a look at all the potential tools and techniques that are available for planning and estimating, there are well over 80 of them. And I may have missed one or two here as well. These are all the different tools and techniques that are listed as useful when doing planning and estimating activities according to the PMBOK Guide 5th edition. Now, obviously as a practitioner, we wouldn't expect you to be completely able to use all of those in an expert sense, but you should be aware that there are specific tools and techniques, more than simply guessing or responding to political pressure or saying what the client wants you to say. So if you are interested, please just go to the PMBOK Guide 5th edition and take a look at the brief description contained in that book of each of these planning and estimating techniques. And like the PMBOK Guide says, only use them if they're appropriate and then use them appropriately. So let's take a closer look at the reasons for poor planning and estimating. Now, the reasons for poor planning and estimating generally fall into two distinct categories. We can categorize these reasons as either technical reasons or people-based reasons. Let's take a closer look at each of these categories. When it comes to poor planning and estimating and the technical reasons that this exists, here are some or most of those technical reasons. First up, choosing the wrong technique or methods. As you saw a couple of slides ago, over 80 techniques and methods are listed in the PMBOK Guide, but people choose the wrong ones or apply them incorrectly and don't have the knowledge needed to apply them correctly. There may also be a lack of training and competency development within the practitioners, and that may be reinforced at an organizational level. We know that one of the reasons for poor planning and estimating is simply the lack of an estimating database, and this ties in very nicely and very closely with the next bullet point, the lack of lessons learned. Of course, any lessons you learned about what went well and what didn't go so well with your estimates and forecasts and plans can be put back into your own estimating database. Your estimating database can also be your own materials on what costs are and what times are for common elements of your project. Another reason for poor planning and estimating is that it's often viewed as a once-off exercise, something we do at the project or maybe at the business case stage to get it approved. And then we just move on and forget about those and focus on what's actually going to happen. Another reason for poor planning or estimating is lack of contractual consequences for poor estimates or poor plans. And I've seen this many times. People awarded contracts on the basis of an estimate provided or a plan provided, and then the project doesn't pan out, but there's no hard contractual consequences. Things like liquidated damages, penalty clauses for not meeting those plans and estimates. Also a lack of standardization. Are you using days or weeks? Are you using dollars? Are you using euros? Are you using Australian dollars? All of these things contribute to poor planning and estimating. And the final point is a lack of customization or tailoring of your particular planning and estimating processes, and either having too little or too many processes. So again, when you come to do your planning and estimating, it should reflect your particular organizational culture, the complexity of the projects you're involved in, and the industry that you're involved in. And you should tailor all of your planning and estimating processes to reflect those particular elements. So the other reason that we may see poor planning and estimating done on a project are because of people. And the top reason here, and I'm sure we've all experienced it before, is political pressure. This is pressure from the client, the project sponsor, the governance committee, or other senior people for you to give out plans and estimates that keep people happy, perhaps to win the work or to stop a client complaining. And these things mean that you're being dishonest. And we've all faced it before. But the challenge for any practitioner is to refuse to submit to political pressure. This obviously links closely with our next bullet point on poor governance and lack of executive support, where perhaps the organizational culture doesn't really care about reliable plans and estimates. And we see this with the next point with weak sponsorship as well. If the top tiers don't want good plans or estimates and accept poor planning and estimating, then the practitioners don't feel the need to do any better than they are doing. The fourth bullet point is a particularly important one, and it's the ineffective communication about accuracy of estimates. Now, if you go ahead and tell somebody an estimate, say for example, you tell them that you think this element of the project is going to cost between $100,000 and $150,000, guess what they've just heard? Well, they've heard what they want to hear, and usually that's the lower end of that. So they've just heard $100,000. Now what you meant was, based on the incomplete information we have right now, we think there's a wide range of costs between $100,000 and $150,000, and more than likely it will come somewhere in the middle of that range. But that may not be what the other person heard. They may have heard that it is entirely possible that the project could cost $100,000, and then no matter if you come back later with a revised estimate or an actual delivery cost of $125,000, they will think that you're over budget. So it's something that I do press practitioners on to be very careful when they are communicating their estimates and the accuracy of those estimates. The next bullet point is poorly defined roles and responsibilities. And this is just a lack of accountability and definition of who's responsible for doing the planning and estimating and what level of accuracy they're supposed to have in it. The next point is the wanting to please, or also known as optimism bias. If you go out and ask people for an estimate of a particular thing, whether it's time or cost or risk or quality, It used to be said that people would always give you the lowest, but they don't. The research tells us that when asked for an estimate, most people will actually subconsciously understand the sort of thing you want to hear. Usually that's the best case scenario, and that's what they'll tell you to do. The next bullet point for poor planning and estimating, simply too busy, also known as, oh, just get on and do it, or the one that I increasingly frustrated was, or at the moment, is, oh, we're agile, so we don't do plans and estimates. If you ever meet somebody who says, well, we're agile, so we don't do plans and estimates, they don't understand what an agile-based methodology is about. Being agile does mean planning and estimating. It just means doing it on a shorter time scale. And the final bullet point is very interesting too. Losing staff, and with it the knowledge that they hold about planning and estimating, is one of the key reasons for poor planning and estimating. So be aware of that one and try and document their knowledge, so if they do move on for whatever reason, you keep that information within the organization. So now that we've had a look at what some of the reasons are for poor planning and estimating, let's take you through a number of suggestions for how to improve. So just a reminder, this webinar is a broad overview, not an in-depth look at the tools and techniques and the ways that you can be better at planning and estimating. So we've got 5 slides here, each with 2 or 3 points on it, and some of them may be useful to you to help do better planning and estimating. The first one, develop standardized and appropriate processes for all of your plans. And this means don't let practitioners develop their own planning templates and processes. This just becomes an impossible nightmare to try and manage when trying to take a portfolio or program view of all the projects that are underway. Next, commit to developing practitioner capability and competency. Get people the skills that they need and the experience that they need to be better at planning and estimating. Make it a core capability. Make it part of their professional development plans. Because the great thing about it is you can easily get people the training, but when it comes to planning and estimating, it's very easy to observe whether they're actually doing it in practice. So as part of their assessment, you can tick off the training part of it, but then you can very easily observe whether they're actually putting it into place and how competent they are when they are putting it into place. Next, and this is a very important point, when you are doing plans and estimates, use the people who will be doing the work to do those plans and estimates. They know how to do the work. They've probably done it before. Ask them, either individually or groups or whichever techniques you want to use, about the plans and estimates. Once you've done your first iterations of the plans and estimates, put it back by them and say, what do you think of these? Have I captured what you said? I'm sure we've all been in those situations where planning and estimating and even contractual negotiations are done by a separate team and then handed over to another team for delivery. And all of that responsibility goes to the delivery team. I know I've certainly been in that, and recently I was talking to a colleague who was in that situation, and it was just impossible to deliver what the sales team had promised and signed. Here's another good point. Use a work breakdown structure, and once again, and just stressing, it doesn't matter whether you're in construction and your project is 2 or 3 years long, or you're working in a complex agile environment. Work breakdown structures are useful. Obviously, the one instance will be smaller, the agile environment. The construction environment, they'll be a lot bigger. The key thing is here to use the work breakdown structure to break down your project however you want. Resources, products, phase, whatever you want to break it down. Get them down into small elements, because if you can estimate or plan for those smaller elements, you can aggregate those up into a much more accurate plan or estimate. Also, preparing the work breakdown structure, any parts of the work breakdown structure that can't be broken down indicate where there's ambiguity and uncertainty in your estimates, and you should highlight that and make it clear that when you're telling people what your plan or estimate is, that due to the nature of the WBS, this part of the project has got a good estimate and plan attached to it. This part of the WBS is less defined, and therefore there's a lot more uncertainty or inaccuracy in the plans and estimates for that portion of the work. Next, regularly use your plans and estimates to compare what you thought was going to happen with what is actually happening. That's why they're there. As I said earlier on, a lot of people do planning and estimating as a one-off activity, then forget about them and have no idea whether things are going well or not. Obviously here a tip: software is very useful for highlighting very quickly where plans and estimates don't match what is actually occurring. And obviously the sooner you can learn that information, the sooner you can respond and try and get things back on track. Use lessons learned. Collect lessons learned throughout the whole life of the project. Collect that information about what went well and why it went well, and collect that information about what didn't go so well and why it didn't go so well. Obviously, if you do collect these and document them, you have the possibility to repeat the things that went well in future forecasting, planning and estimating, and avoid the things that didn't go so well in the same areas. Take all this information and put it into your own database. Collect it, make it easy to search, make it easy to find. This means that you'll be able to stop relying on gut feel and what people think is right, and you actually be able to bring up data that says, no, this is what this thing cost us 6 months ago or 1 year ago, or this is how long this task took us 6 months ago or a year ago. And you'll be able to use that information to do much better estimating and planning going forward. The alternative is, and this is the case worldwide, there are many sources of commercially available databases out there that you could subscribe to or buy. But the important thing is here is to use real data about time and cost or quality or risk rather than people's opinions or gut feel. Get professional help. There are many professions out there that specialize in different aspects of planning and estimating. One of my favorite professions is the profession of quantity surveying. I've done some construction projects and I've done some IT projects in my time. But when it came to construction projects, quantity surveyors were absolutely invaluable for double checking our estimates when it came to cost and time. There are many other professions out there. And one of the things that I find strange about the IT world is the claim that you can't bring quantity surveyors into IT projects, which is strange, of course, because we've been doing IT projects for about 40 years. And I would disagree with that. I think there's a lot of IT projects where we do know enough information about time for coding or cost for particular module development to bring in professionals. And recently I was talking with a colleague who's been working in the IT field for 20 years, and he shared with me that he had actually brought a construction quantity surveyor onto a recent complex IT job, and that construction quantity surveyor had brought some tools and techniques that enabled them to actually do very good estimates for this complex IT project. It's a great example of cross-pollination of information and experience between what is often seen as different parts of project management. And as an aside, I do think that the construction industries and the IT industries have a lot to learn from each other when it comes to project management. The next point here, don't see planning and estimating as a one-off activity. Be prepared for change on your project, and be prepared to replan and re-estimate. There is always going to be change on your project, and you need to look at how that change affects the plans and estimates that you've already made. Please remember though, any changes or revisions need to be fully communicated, understood and agreed to. Have appropriate supporting processes for deciding on how changes will be approved and how they will be incorporated into your new plans, and use a robust configuration management system to make sure you're always working off the latest plans and latest estimates. Our final points on how to improve are about people. The first one here is create a culture of honesty. Reward people for providing accurate plans and estimates. Encourage senior stakeholders to refrain from applying political pressure to get the forecast they want. Ultimately, you'll have a better reputation, you'll have more successful projects as well, but it needs to come from everybody. This needs to be the demand for accurate forecasts, estimates and plans, and also the acknowledgement to resist any pressures to change those. And then I mentioned it earlier on, but when you are communicating estimates, be aware that people will hear what they want to hear. So if necessary, repeat things and repeat things and repeat things until you're sure that the nature and accuracy of the estimates has actually been understood. And be aware that you need to communicate that the estimate will get better with more information as well. So these are some suggestions for how to improve your approaches to planning and estimating. As I mentioned, it's not meant to be in depth. We simply don't have time to do that. But if you were interested, you could return to the slide of the over 80 tools and techniques on planning and estimating from the PMBOK guide, or look them up in the book yourself and get additional training on anything there that may be useful to you. Of course, as I said at the beginning, feel free to contact me and I can direct you to some of those things as well. So in conclusion, and thanks very much for paying attention so far, when it comes to planning and estimating, the correct question to ask is not how much and when, but instead, how reliable are the estimates on which this plan is based? What assumptions have been made? How much detailed work has been done to verify the accuracy of these estimates? What do we need to improve these? How are we accounting for uncertainty, etc., etc.? Treat plans and estimates for what they are. Spend time and effort on doing them as best you can and realizing the limitations of them. And ultimately, you'll have more successful projects, you'll have a better reputation, you'll have happier clients, and you'll have happier practitioners. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this very brief and broad introduction to planning and estimating. As always, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm more than happy to chat with you about anything about project management, including what we've covered in this webinar. My contact details are down here, and a copy of this presentation is also available from the website as well. So thank you very much, and I look forward to chatting with you.